Welcome to another edition of Hacker Heroes, a segment where we explore the stories behind the hackers in our community. Today, we welcome my good friend Josh Corman to the show to discuss his work in improving cybersecurity in healthcare, his run-ins with the hacker group Anonymous, briefing Congress on matters of cybersecurity, and aspects of his personal journey through his life and career. Stay tuned. Josh Corman, coming up next. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. From the Security Weekly Vault, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things being sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Oh, we hadn't started yet. Are we starting now? Is this started? I think we've started. Hey, Josh Corman, you're here with me in studio. I can't tell you how much I love having first a human being here in studio to
Any
talk
human
with.
being, Pulse.
But then for it to be Josh Corman is just, it's a double excitement. I'm doubly excited.
It's mutual love.
It is mutual love. Yeah, it's good to have you here, man.
I like being here.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down. You know, we figured out we've not had you down for like a one-on-one or even like you've always been in like a more group discussionary.
You mostly like being in the group dynamic, yes.
I don't know why we've always used you that. I don't want to say we used you, right? But that's when we call upon you. It's
usually a group setting, yes.
But now you're here talking about, how'd you get your start in this field in information security?
I'm in InfoSec.
You are.
Oh,
I mean, you flirt the line, I think, at certain points in your career.
Yeah.
But I would consider you a hacker, and I would consider you in information security.
Well, I don't think I even know when I began, but I just want to point out, because I'm having this flashback, the pandemic, I saw you last just before the pandemic started.
Yes.
And now since it's technically over, sarcasm.
Maybe.
But
Will it ever be? We hope.
I was sitting, I think, right where you are.
Yes.
And then the COVID. Okay. So how did I get into this stuff?
Yes. How did you get into this?
It's hard to pick like a specific time, but I always like to describe the motivations of a hacker. First thing I say to the policymakers, because I do a lot of policy now, is first of all, hacking's not a crime; it's magic, right? You can use it for good or evil, right?
Movies, yeah,
of course. But we're trying to rebrand it, take it back.
Mm-hmm.
And if you realize that it's like magic, then there's bad wizards and there's good wizards. And thank goodness we have Hermione and Harry Potter and Gandalf to save the day.
I like to think Doctor Strange, but
sure.
Okay.
Sure.
He's my favorite wizard.
Okay. And then within that, I usually have those 5 Ps of motivations to describe. There's protectors, puzzlers, prestige, profit, protest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I always want to be a protector. I always want to be a superhero. Huge Stan Lee fan, Spider-Man, Captain America, mostly Marvel, not exclusively. And I just wanted to fight bad guys, be a protector. It's in my blood. So that was always there. But also did
you choose computers and hacking, or I won't talk about myself, but I wanted to go into a field where I could help and protect people. I think I kind of fell into the computer thing, and it just was a kind of ironic, or just the circumstance that, I actually get to protect people. I was like, so I did check that box. Was similar for you? Like,
the tech part is, and this dates me, but based on how old I am, people didn't have home computers, but my dad did. He worked for digital, so we had
on the same
a lot
age?
of exposure.
We're like the same age.
I think we're about the same age. I think you're
30, 32.
Yeah, 30.
Yeah. Okay. We'll just go with that.
But I had a lot of access to tech nerds and computer guys.
Did you grow up in Massachusetts, where digital was headquartered?
It was
headquartered in Mass, right?
Yeah. We started in Mass, then in New Hampshire, did a brief stint in the Bay Area, came back to New Hampshire. But I had a lot of exposure, not just to a computer in my house, but also, big barbecues or clam bakes or whatever with some of the pioneers of these things. In fact, he worked on the information superhighway, they called it. The
yes. Oh, wow.
Net.
I've not heard that term that's a 90s, early 90s term.
Even before that, or at least for me.
Yeah. Wasn't it like a news clip where they're talking about like Today Show, right?
Yeah. But like I was in the Boston Seaport before there was a seaport, right above, overlooking the Boston Aquarium, and he was working on revealing DeckNet.
Yes.
And DeckNet was precursor. And so I just had a lot of exposure to it. So when I would write the initial, ASCII video games, I wouldn't follow the rules. I would just see what else can I do.
Right.
So
you learned programming early age from your dad.
Yeah. So it was I would say I wanted to be a superhero. And then on the computer side, I was just deeply curious. In fact, my first professional job was software QA. I just had a knack for breaking stuff.
Yeah.
Just a kinetic energy around you. Why Soul Blood had almost the same story.
I told you were a hacker.
But I never associated with it.
Yeah, but that's hacking in its truest sense.
But I'm more of a protector than a breaker. Yeah.
But I think we use our hacker mentality and mindset for different things. And protecting is one of them. And even if you're breaking, you are protecting as long as you're disclosing in some responsible fashion. Coordinated. However you want to phrase it. There's a lot of nuances there.
There are.
We can talk about that after, but yeah. So you're always around technology. Now, did you know the Loft guys? Did you hang out with the Loft guys? Being in Massachusetts at that time?
Eventually, I met some of the Loft guys. But I thought they were superheroes, right? I'm younger. So I knew of them, respected them, but I wasn't in that scene, Right. Yeah. I spent 5 years in software QA, and we, you might even know these companies, but so I was at Cabletron.
Yeah, I remember.
And they made a Spectrum product. So I worked on software. I got a full-time job before I graduated.
Where'd you go to school? A lot of choices for schools in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I was self-funded. So I wanted to be a marine biologist, and there was a program at UNH, and it was cheaper than out of state.
There you go.
I got sick of knowing all the Latin names for all the snails. So, and it was expensive. So
you were living in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought so. I thought that you.
Oh, I shouldn't say UNH. You might think New Haven, but yeah, University of New Hampshire in Durham. Yeah. And I'm like, this is expensive. And I got a job as an intern at Cabletron and paid pretty well. And thought about dropping out of school, but I ended up saying, someone told me, get a degree, anything.
Yeah.
So
what year was this? Was what, mid-90s?
Oh, we're getting to the age thing, huh? Well, if I'm 30,
Well, if we're 30, wait a minute.
This was mid-90s, late 90s.
Yeah. So we're the same age.
Yeah.
Still 32 for those counting. We're college really young.
So I got a philosophy degree just to get a piece of paper and something.
Yeah.
And but we had a partner for Cabletron out of Canada. I think it was called IntelliTactics.
I remember
it was an early sim.
That name, that rings a bell. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God.
You want some scotch? Bourbon?
I would love some. Bourbon, please.
Bourbon?
Yeah.
We have bourbon. Don't mind my fingers.
So I had to figure out how to integrate their
For listeners, my fingers are on the ice, by the way, not on.
I had to figure out how to integrate that into the network management stuff. And I was just like, this is awesome. So eventually I'm like, I want to make my job cybersecurity. And then 9/11 happened, 3 months into my cyber job at a stealth startup. And eventually we got bought by ISS and X-Force. And
yes.
And I think
what did IntelliTactics? What did they do?
It's like a sim before Sims.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was awesome. The team was awesome.
The consolidation in those.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. It was.
I don't remember who bought them. I think one of the sharks from Shark Tank bought them. Herkovec.
I think he bought them. Robert Hershevek. Yeah.
Or no, somebody else bought it. You know who bought it? I know who bought it. Trustwave bought it eventually. I think so. I think Trustwave bought it.
Interesting.
But I don't think I really got into the current hacker scene until ISS bought us.
Yeah.
I went to Virus Bulletin with Miko Iponen and other people, but I didn't really get into the hacker scene until ISS bought us in 2002. Because X-Force was very
before they got bought by IBM. Right.
Yeah, then we got bought by IBM.
Yep.
Yeah. That was
so
a long
you stayed
journey.
there for a while.
Yeah, from that job, it was called VSIS, Virtual Computer Immune System. And I think we had patents that probably all the Manions and FireEyes of the world, probably FireEye, probably infringed upon at some point. But IBM didn't know what they had. But we did emulation of unknown executables to see if there's malicious behavior.
Oh, imagine that. That sounds like FireEye.
Yeah, but it was before we even had, before it was mainstream to even have the kitten killing phrase of APT. It was, there was some industrial espionage, usually in biopharmaceutical research companies. And so the custom designer malware you couldn't use signatures. It was useless. So I was really fascinated by the work. The inventor was genius. The technology was cool. And then 9/11 cost us our funding, and it was, then we got bought by ISS and stayed there long enough to learn some stuff, and then got bought by IBM, which was in some ways terrible, but also gave me more exposure to how a really big company does mergers and acquisitions. And then I went to 451 to be an analyst.
Gotcha. Is that what I'm trying to think when we met?
We might have met through the
something
X-Force-ish stuff, but and Source Boston as well.
Yeah.
Maybe. Probably Source
It was definitely
Boston.
Conferences.
Yeah.
Which means I think it's important for our community and culture to get back to conferences in some capacity. I think it's always going to look slightly different, but I think it's important that we come back to it.
Yeah, there was I barely look at social media. I'm not on Facebook by design, and I barely look at Twitter anymore. And I've been pretty busy for the last 2 years. But we can talk about that. That you didn't even know what I was doing. Most people don't. I disappeared.
Because you're quiet about it.
I disappeared.
Yeah.
But there was a flare up the other day with some of my friends about, I think Robert Lee made one of those comics saying, there's been no conferences and what impact did it have? And it was, it was satire and is saying no difference, right? There's been no difference.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
And I said, I don't completely agree with that. It certainly hurt my cavalry momentum a bit.
We haven't talked about that yet.
Yep, we have not. But Bob Rudis made a point that, there's a lot of parts of conferences that would exclude people who couldn't be funded to go or couldn't get there, or couldn't get into the talk lineup, and that virtual conferences really removed a lot of those barriers. So there's some very good things. Like many of the conferences we used to go to all the time didn't need to happen. Some of them did. And the degree to which you should make some remote participation or scholarships for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to get there, or first time speakers, there's a lot to fix. But I think we should go back to a non-zero amount of in-person conferences. Especially,
I think there was a flooding of the market where, excuse me, we'll talk about burnout, but there was a conference burnout aspect to it as well. I think from both the speaker side and the attendee side and a sponsor side, activity. So like, how many could you go to? I think the pandemic for many was like a breather from the conference scene. And I think some realizations that came out of that were like, maybe I didn't need to go to 52 conferences a year. Like, maybe 10 was good. Maybe 5 was good.
It depends on what you're after as well. Like for a lot of us, there's not a clean line between our day job and our hobby. And, and a lot of our family, our chosen family, they live all over the world. So you see your family. So some of this was we were going because we wanted to see our family.
Yes.
We wanted to expand our family.
Try and explain that to the significant others of the world and go, going to a conference, it's for work. And then like after a while, they're like, yeah, but like work is not really work for you. Like you hang out with your friends. I'm like, yeah, but that's part of work too.
It's still work. Yeah.
But there was definitely a line where sometimes I'm like, I'm not going. Like there's kid number 2 or 3 on the way. And like, the priorities. Yes.
Yeah. So I there's certainly a room for hallway con. Some of the best relationships I ever formed, you wouldn't have formed unless you were in person.
You were one of my greatest hallway con moments.
Oh yeah?
Ever. Do you even know that you were in my greatest ever hallway con moment?
I didn't know it was your greatest, but I remember having some very heartfelt.
Yeah, it's top 5.
And like it's authentic human connections.
It was you and Gene Kim.
Oh.
I was at Black Hat. I don't even remember what year it was or what capacity, but it was at Black Hat. And it was late. Like, so it wasn't late at night. It was early in the morning.
Okay.
and I was like, I really have to go to bed. And I don't even remember where I was, where I drank several, I think is the term we're using, several drinks. And I don't know how it happened, but I stumbled across you and Gene Kim. I don't think I knew Gene too well at that point. In fact, I don't think I did, but I knew you pretty well at that point. And maybe you even introduced me to Gene, or Gene knew of me because he listened to the show. And I was like, what? I'm like, why? Really? You listen to my show? Like, seriously. And then I was like, I went through, none of the listeners know this, right? But now it's about me and not you. But
It's about us.
You are part of the story.
Yeah.
So I went through various points of feeling about the podcasting and keeping it going. Because I think what I don't often say when I show up here every week is that like, it's hard to do it every single week and keep it going for not just 10 years, but 15 plus years. And I was at one of those moments where I was like, it's hard to keep this thing going. Like, I got to keep it funded. I don't think it was ever about like lack of passion. It was just, I got to keep the various balls in the air. And you and Gene Kim both were like, dude, like, wake up. I know it's early in the morning. Like, wake up. What are you talking about? And like, you have an awesome thing and you should go after it and go get it, and gave me some encouragement. Based on that, Gene Kim personally spent time with me to help me. I, to this day, love him for that. And I'm so grateful that he took what now is, I guess, is not in Gene Kim time is a lot of time, right? And helped me set certain things up and set me in the right path in certain areas. Forever grateful. But you were instrumental to that story. I was like, it was one of the times where being at a physical conference, talking with friends, gets you through some kind of, and I'm like, the world wasn't crashing. Like, there are people with way worse problems, right? I was just like, I'm having trouble figuring some stuff out. And, you know, like, you and then Gene helped me. And I pledge to do that with other people too. Like, if
you got to pay
you're
it
stuck,
forward,
right? You're stuck, you need guidance, advice, or whatever. I try and pay it forward as much as I can. Because again, this is not like an earth-shattering thing. You know, in my life since then, certainly I've experienced way more difficult times in my friends and family's lives and my own life, right? But that was an awesome gesture. And you were there.
Well,
and helping and encouraging me, which is important.
You're giving me feels. But, you know, how many of us have benefited from a moment like that? How many of us have done that for somebody? There's been a lot of folks, it would be a distraction to talk about this, but I teach for Carnegie Mellon University. And so tons of CISOs come through there. Like, I've been there since the beginning. And you don't even know if anybody listened to you.
Yeah.
But then you'll see someone later in life doing something incredible. And like, they'll reach out and they'll like, hey, I took a lot of courses back then, but like that thing you said in that thing stuck with me. And it's, you know, it made me choose this path. And
makes my day every time someone does.
You never know what you're putting into the world. But one of the keys, one of the reasons I love Gene, one of the reasons I love you is there's a lot of cynicism in this space, but he's just full of excitement and energy and wants to put things into the world. He does it mostly as he's a puzzler. So I'm a protector first and foremost.
Right.
But a puzzler is a close second. I like really hard problems.
What are those five? You said there's 5 P's?
Yeah. Protectors want to make the world a safer place, right? Run towards the fire. Puzzlers, they do it for challenge and curiosity. You want to take something apart, put it back together. What can I do? Prestige, they want to be the first, want to be the best, want to win the white jacket, you know, want to get a keynote. They want to usually own a topic, which I think is a problem we could talk about.
Sure.
Profit, you know, more of a capitalistic, personal, professional gain. And we sometimes call the last one protest, sometimes patriotism, but some for or against an ideology.
A cause or an ideology,
yeah. And, you know, everybody that stumbled into this, it was initially a puzzler to some extent.
Sure.
But what keeps you going? What's your fire? What gets you out of bed in the morning? You know, I usually find people major in one and they minor in another. And when I'm meeting them, I'm, you know, trying to figure out pretty quickly who I'm talking to.
So which, other than being a Paul, which PMI?
See, some of you are hard. You're definitely a puzzler. Definitely. Like you really get excited when you find something new. Like I remember when you were first playing with IoT and everything, it was like a new frontier.
Yes.
So you're a puzzler for sure. That's in the mix.
As I got older, I realized it's very sadistic. Like I like being in that place where I've got this problem that I can't figure out. Like I used to hate it and like I want progress. And now like I like being in that place where like I really struggle to figure this out and I'm on the same problem for sometimes days. Like I'd like to live in that space.
It's tough too because people usually project onto you what they care about. So as you know, I also have a lot of haters, which we might get to.
That's another conference moment.
that's one where you helped me a lot. That was DerbyCon.
You know, and I'm like, I didn't even have that in my head. Again, several drinks in the conference. And Josh was sitting there, and I think we were having cigars. It was definitely outside at DerbyCon.
Yeah, it was outside. Yeah.
And so there was definitely cigars involved. And that's probably why I was standing there, and I look over, and Josh is there. And I don't remember what you're talking about. And I think it was like way off topic. And again, several drinks in, I'm like, Josh, like, why do people hate you so? Because I think you were talking and I was like, oh, I like listening to Josh talk about various topics. I'm like, dude, why do so many people hate you? Like, I don't get it. Like I don't get it.
I don't either. But I used to care more about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's that too.
Yeah.
I try and see the good in people as well. And I try and accept people for the flaws that they have to a certain degree, obviously. But I don't know.
Well, if we go down that road, it's going to take us somewhere. Maybe we'll get there. But let's try to stay positive for a minute.
Those roads go down different because was the anonymous work before or after the cavalry?
Before.
So let's start with the anonymous work.
Sure.
Why did you dig into anonymous?
So I got my degree.
Puzzler, problem, curious.
No, this is my
prestige.
This is a protector for sure.
Okay.
Protector for sure. So I would say that I was more of a hacker sidekick up until around then. But this is how I saw myself. I wasn't going to be dropping a day. I wasn't going to be making a new tool. I worked for a lot of important startups and helped them do a lot of things, mostly on the product management side.
Sure.
But I was really worried when I saw the rise of hacktivism. And it wasn't so much that they were technically sophisticated. It's that my philosophy background, really quick education, right?
Yeah.
I focused mostly on social contract theory and ethics and morality and different schools of moral systems. And not so much political philosophy, but there's the concept of a social contract is that the state of nature is a state of war, nasty, brutish, in short. You know, I'll kill you and steal your coconuts while you're sleeping, but the same thing's true. You'll kill me and steal my coconuts.
Right.
So because that's not tenable, we create a compact that I won't kill you in your sleep if you don't kill me in my sleep, right? So the social contract isn't written down anywhere.
Yes.
But it keeps us from being Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
So
keeps nations from turning off each other's power.
Yeah. In fact, there was an article I read this week. Not sure we're going to air, but I haven't read it yet because I'm afraid I'm going to get triggered. But I will mention what it is if you remind me. But I was watching this rise of hacktivism and direct action online. Some hacking, mostly social engineering or
indifferent from previous hacktivism.
Yeah, I mean, I knew of it.
CDC was,
but this one
but they were even less technical and more of a very social engineering kind of group. When I read the book from Joseph Mann, right, I was like, well, they were more about manipulation in a social kind of grand way, what we would label hacktivism. It
wasn't the first hacktivism, but when I was watching it, something made me very nervous, and I couldn't put my finger on it initially. But I wrote an op-ed. I reached out to Bill Brenner when he was still at CSO.
He was here.
He was just here
today.
And I said, I have to write something before I chicken out.
Yeah.
And I had met, through my friend David Etchu, I'd met Aaron Barr before he got attacked. And I was watching Anonymous in the periphery. And I was starting to get nervous about it. And then they destroyed him. I mean,
who was Aaron Barr now?
Destroyed him. He was the CEO of HB Gary Federal.
Oh, right.
He was Anonymous. He was on the Colbert Show because they destroyed him.
Yeah,
he poked. I think. How did Colbert put
it? They doxed him entirely, right? And it's all come back to me.
Just annihilated. And I met him at Tapas. We had like a bunch of sangrias because he was a friend of a friend. Didn't know him. Don't even know if he's a good guy. I just met him like a month before he got destroyed.
Oh, interesting.
So I watched a victim up close of, oh, wow. And, I could talk about this for hours, but I won't. I'll do the short version. The short version is I felt it was culturally significant. And a lot of our friends thought it was script kiddies and it's just DDoS and it doesn't matter. And who cares?
Yeah, because when did that all happen?
I don't even remember.
It was long before there was a well-established track record of people making money in ransomware at a nation-state level that
way before
significant headlines on the mainstream news today. Yeah.
So way before that. The way I ended up describing this to policymakers is I started getting scared about what comes next. And we did a panel at DEF CON. It was me, Jericho, Paul Roberts, and some others that ended up backing out. But we were going to have Aaron Barr on the panel. And anyhow, back to the Bill Brenner. I wrote an op-ed essentially for the rise of the chaotic actor because everyone's like, oh, they're evil or they're blah, blah, blah. I said, No, Dungeons and Dragons, 3x3. There's chaotic good.
Yeah.
Like Robin Hood, right? Working outside the system to right wrongs. There's chaotic neutral and there's chaotic evil. Some like the Joker, they want to see the world burn. And I'm like, that's all of the above. I can see in Anonymous all of that above. So that the chaotic
there were actors within Anonymous that represented all of the different various forms of evil.
But what I was worried about wasn't so much the healthy activism part. It was, I was thinking in the back of my head, and eventually I put words to it because after the DEF CON thing, we shared our thoughts on stage. We got screamed at by active members of Anonymous. It got pretty intense. We had an hour long, this is all on video. And then afterwards we had an hour long Q&A. That's back when DEF CON was doing the Q&As. I think this was DEF CON 19 or something, maybe 16 or 17. And we got in this really nice discussion because half the stuff we said was spot on and they'd never heard anyone understand them. Right. And half the stuff we said was dead wrong. And so we had a feisty exchange. And then I leaned over to Jericho. I'm like, we have to write something about this. So we started a blog post. It was going to be a blog post. It turned into a mini book, but it was called Building a Better Anonymous. And we were just studying the rise of the chaotic actor. And we started small, just saying what are some
sources on this, right? You spent time either with people directly in Anonymous or people that knew them, right?
So I was like I felt like I had to lean in. And in the course of writing it, it became clear to me why. So without getting too professorial here on philosophy, what I ended up telling pretty senior people in the UK and US government and elsewhere is that if you think about the social contract, it's not written down anywhere. But it's really four things that keep us from being Lord of the Flies. There's some sort of nationalism, loyalty to your country, your culture. There's some sort of formal rule of law. Number two, like laws or representative government. There's some sort of religious cohesion, Christianity, Bible, Quran, pick your favorite.
The ability
belief
to practice
structure.
Religion.
No, just common beliefs.
Common beliefs.
And they can be dual-edged, of course.
They can be competing beliefs, but
there's some cohesion around Judeo-Christian beliefs in the US, for example.
So be a good, regardless of religion, you should interpret as be a good person kind of thing is what you're saying.
Yeah. And number four is participation in your family structure and local social norms. And I think intuitively, I'm like, oh shit, they're 0 for 4.
Yeah.
So you have these large groups of post-national young people acting directly online. They're post-national. They distrust formal power structures.
Yep.
Most agnostic and atheistic generation. And with the erosion of the family structure, plus their community is the internet. And I'm like, this is a trend towards bad places.
You're right. They created new social norms online.
Yeah, it didn't mean that we were all screwed, but what I was worried about is if the traditional ties that bind, the structure, the cohesion is evaporating, we need a new cyber social contract is what I said. So something must replace it. So whether you're religious or not doesn't matter. Whether you like the current government structures doesn't matter. Those had the utility of keeping us somewhat stable. So Vanity Fair ended up covering this extensively. Kaminsky, moment for Kaminsky. Cheers. Kaminsky, beautiful, beautiful mind. Beautiful person.
Talk about someone that wanted to help people.
So we had long conversations with Kaminsky about this. He was participating a lot in the DNSSEC stuff. He's trying to save the internet. Moss was DT was at ICANN at the time. So they were concerned. They were terrified by could you take down the internet if they got aggressive enough? And the Arab Spring stuff was happening. And this seemed culturally significant. And the reactions to that was to try to break up a free, open, democratized internet and make it like balkanized at the nation state level, which would just lead to much more surveillance and oppression. So this looked like a battle for the soul of technology. And since increasingly society depends on connected technology, I figured this was a big, big deal. So we leaned into it. We studied it. We earned their trust. A lot of key players eventually introduced themselves in real life. Sometimes not. One of the most key players was mind blowing. Talk about in-person only type things. And I had done things to put my neck out a lot. There were a few times or 3 times where I was really scared. And I'm like, I might regret this. I might turn Aaron Barr. I might get attacked if I do this. But thus far, I was like snake charming. You could almost say like I was doing things increasingly that earned their trust and respect enough that they didn't agree with me all the time, but they listened. We were engaged in a dialogue. You were kind of
shining a spotlight on them, but like telling them that it's okay. Like,
and there was no internal consistency. They didn't agree with each other.
Yeah.
And they were being parts of the anti-sec were being actively usurped by a Fed, an FBI informant, right? Saber.
Yeah, it was. Well, they flipped him.
Yeah, they flipped him.
But that was a direct offshoot from was Anonymous the first that spawned LulzSec, Antitrust, a lot of those other
There was a lot of
groups?
time with Anonymous in Operation Op Payback 2, well before LulzSec.
Mm-hmm.
LulzSec 50 days of lulz.
Yes.
Came later. No, but
that was epic, by the way.
So I was scared.
I feel like we don't talk about that enough, how epic that really was.
It was strange times. If you haven't seen the documentary about this, it's awesome.
I think I have.
We Are Legion.
I have seen that.
In fact, that filmmaker's gone on to do some other pretty amazing stuff. Brian Knapperberger.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, Jericho and I leaned into this. It took 2 years of our lives easily to write that thing.
And you presented on it, conferences, the whole thing. Yeah.
While we were writing it, after we wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mostly walked the line where they were engaged and understood. And there were a couple times that I put my neck out and tried to cause some cognitive dissonance. And I didn't know if it was ever going to work. And eventually I met one of the really important characters in the mix. And
so there were really important characters in the mix, because I think the press portrayed them as just this ragtag bunch.
It depends on what parts you were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
But he, unsolicited, we were just having some drinks in a different country. And unsolicited, I didn't want to bring it up, but he said, there were a couple times when I could have gone left or right. And I want you to know, I really listened to you. I took it on board. And I'm just like biting my tongue and listening. And he tells me exactly the three moments that I was really scared about. But, he was
saying, like, basically there were points where he could have gotten really mad at you and destroyed your life.
Or just when he nudged the herd
into destroying your life.
Not just, it wasn't about me.
Oh, okay.
Into things that would be bad.
Not you personally. There were 3 points where, like, shit could have gone really sideways.
Yeah, I think
he was like, no, we didn't do that because I listened to you, Josh. Was one. You were the voice of reason.
Yeah.
At least one of them, right?
Yeah, you'll find that I often put myself in harm's way. So it's one of the reasons it hurts when haters think I'm doing this for myself. Like, I've taken huge pay cuts a couple of times, huge detours in my career a couple of times. But, like, I sincerely run towards the fire. Like, if something's really bad, I feel obligated. It's like the Spider-Man thing. Great power comes great responsibility.
You have done that in your career, right? You ran towards the healthcare stuff.
Yeah.
We'll talk about in the next segment.
The think tank was not good for me financially.
Yeah.
It was hard culturally. CISA, I just spent 2 years in the federal.
We're going to do a whole segment on just your time at CISA.
But, and it, of course,
but the whole cavalry thing.
Well, I think cavalry came out of the anonymous work. So to tie off the anonymous work, it wasn't so much that I was worried about what they were doing. I was worried about what came next.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, I was worried about what if extremist groups, like terrorist groups, pick it up. And I earned enough trust.
I think you're pretty spot on there, though.
I was, but we didn't. I was hoping to be wrong, but let's just
say they're more targeted. I would say that they employ some of the same tactics, however, a lot more targeted. I think seemingly a lot of the anonymous and offshoots were seemingly kind of random. They may choose a target, but the reasons weren't so great. Nation states are, I think, using similar tactics very strategically.
Yeah. But also
as
anonymous
is evidence, like right now.
God, we can talk about anonymous for days.
Right? Like Russia attacking, which I think is happening right now. Like there's huge disruption of services right now in Ukraine.
Well, one thing that got the government's attention was I was also spotting that Anonymous created a wonderful fog of war where non-anonymous people were acting in the name of Anonymous and hiding in the fog of war.
Yes.
And it got to a point towards the end where less than half of the attacks done in the name of Anonymous were anonymous. Less than half. It was
a
cartels.
Smoke screen. It was a smoke screen for other criminal activity.
Yeah. Or worse.
Mm-hmm.
But to tie this off, because it bleeds into the rise of the cavalry, we had finished our work and we were mostly communicating it. But what I really wanted to get to the power brokers in the government, because I'm not a govy, I'm not a Fed, but I guess I am now or was.
You've always played in that space, I feel like, though.
But
you've been comfortable in that space.
I wasn't yet.
Unless you made yourself comfortable.
I made myself comfortable. We said enough things that were true and were coming true that there was one particular opportunity where I was talking about these things done in the name of Anonymous that weren't, and that I was really worried about cyber Al Qaeda, cyber ISIS or something. And we were done. But fast forward eventually, a kid from Team Poison, a UK honor student from Birmingham, Pakistani born in the UK. He was on Darknet Diaries recently. He might have been. I haven't seen it.
I think that was they interviewed a member of Team Poison, I believe. He tried to get him. Inside baseball, tried to get him for a long time. Right? He was fascinated with the Team Poison thing.
So Team Poison got arrested. Well, he got arrested in Team Poison for hacking Tony Blair's website, and while in jail, he radicalized, joined ISIS, and when he got out, he had a white Anglo-Saxon.
So his wife and the son were radicalized as well, and they moved to Syria. Was it Syria?
Yeah, but she was in a punk rock band.
Yes.
White Anglo-Saxon.
He told the story on Darknet Diaries, and I was glad he was telling that story.
Who's he?
Jack Resider, Darknet Diaries. Okay. Jack did great investigative.
I have to listen.
You have to go listen. He did great investigative journalism.
So basically, the stuff we were talking about hinted to enough people in the intelligence community that they started paying more attention to this.
Because of that case, that's interesting when you go listen to that interview now, you and anyone else that hasn't listened, it's required listening now with a different light that tipped somewhat sounds like might have changed law enforcement's view of these hacking groups because they radicalized into terrorist cells.
And it's rare, but out of 7 billion people, even one can be pretty bad. So for those who did not listen to this yet, spoiler alert, he was killed with a drone strike in Raqqa. He was number 4 on the kill list.
Yeah.
And I didn't know.
Apparently the wife and the son were also
later.
Yeah. Now that we've spoiled it for everyone. Sorry.
But here's the thing. When I was warning the Govies, I didn't know he was targeted or killed yet. In fact, I think he got killed later. But that was exactly what I was worried about. Like, it doesn't, even if you don't think Anonymous was very talented, they were talented enough.
Yeah.
Like the Summer of Lulz
talented enough and not right in the head enough. Excuse the horrific, barbaric language there, but he learned enough and it was susceptible to radicalization, where it details how he helped terrorist cells he was like their tech guy.
Yeah, he was recruiting and training them to do social media recruitment.
Yep.
Asymmetric social media stuff. He got paid the same as the battlefield parts of ISIS. And he was also teaching them rudimentary tools like, Shodan or, script kiddie hacking. But
encryption, my guess is he probably knew enough about encryption to teach them how to use it somewhat effectively.
So, we always talk about, well, no one would do that. No one would do that. And I said, look at critical infrastructure, hard-coded default passwords, unsupported software, naked on Shodan or Census.io. And when you look at medical devices, which we've talked about a lot before, even on this show, you don't need to learn anything new. You don't have to learn SCADA or, CAN bus. It's Windows XP or older.
Yeah.
So no learning curve.
The reason you came on the show once with Katie Mazuris was because I made an observation, put it on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it got tons of different views and additional views and retweets. And I was like, wow.
Yeah. So while I was working on that Vanity Fair thing, it took a while. Really great story called World War 3.0, the battle for between chaos control and the future of the internet. They interviewed DT, Vint Cerf, Kaminsky, myself. But the guy kept asking me, why are you so concerned about this?
For our audience, DT is Dark Tangent, aka Jeff Moss. It's okay.
He said, why? The guy says, why are you so concerned about this? I'm like, well, it used to be that no single person could affect more than their local community or their city or maybe their country. But now with hyperconnectivity and social media and post-national, like the rise of personal power for any single individual is huge. So we have all this rise of, so think of Spider-Man again, rise of power without the commensurate responsibility, humility, restraint to use it carefully. He's like, so you think
was it
powerful?
Gear, Kaminsky, Mike Pohl repeated it on like episode 3. You're only a few milliseconds away from every creep on the planet.
Yeah, the one I remember from Gear was on the internet, every sociopath is your next door neighbor.
Yeah.
There's no safe neighborhoods.
It's been like, recycled.
I'm sure someone else said it too.
But it's interesting, I think, early on when we heard that, we were like, oh, that means I can be attacked. But what you're talking about is an interesting aspect of that, in that bad people can communicate with each other like never before and influence each other.
Or reach out and touch some critical infrastructure and hurt people.
That too. But also the social aspect is, I was listening to another podcast that talked about how you implant your mood or feeling on another person, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you smile, typically everyone in the room kind of feels happy and they want to smile too.
Social engineering.
Yeah. If you act anxious, they actually did studies on this. If you act anxious, people around you will start to feel anxious. And they've actually done studies to prove this. If you act angry or upset at work all the time, that rubs off on your coworkers and they start to feel angry or upset. And it's interesting to put that in the context of what you were just talking about, in that we used to be able to only affect our local social circles. Now with the internet, we have a much wider web to cast, to go back to your Spider-Man analogy.
We've amplified some of the less attractive parts of the human species.
Yeah. Which I think is what gave birth to Anonymous, but I think in very rightfully so, you brought a lot of that to the forefront.
And to be fair, I looked at them at the vanguard of this, but it was a logical inevitability for social media as well.
Yeah.
So
they're just like more popular bulletin boards, because if you go read the CDC book from Joseph Min and talk about how they communicated in bulletin boards to spread their messages, and it's the same thing, just on a smaller scale, because you needed a dial-up modem and you need to.
There were barriers to entry.
Yes,
the collision domain or the blast radius was smaller.
Yes.
Separately, let's not get into this, but I wrote an essay I never published on how Facebook and other social media were going to destroy society, and I should have published it because it's
you should have put that on a blockchain or something. Yeah. Should have hashed that and put that out there, even if you weren't going to publish it, dude, because it's totally true.
So I thought it was the dark side of this emergent property of hyperconnectivity and social media. And there's a key moment, though, which this could be the pivot to the cavalry, I guess. But there was a key moment where the journalist he was with me for at least a week up in New Hampshire. And he looks at me across my dining room table. He goes, "Joshua, I've been with you now for a couple of days." He's like, "I get everything you're saying, but like, why are you so worried about it?" And we talked about the personal power curve.
This was the Vanity Fair writer.
Yeah, was Michael Joseph Gross. He's a fantastic human being.
And Michael was interviewing you to write this article.
Really long form piece, months of writing.
Sure. Okay. Which I feel like we need more. I feel like we lost sight of that. But
right. But as I was talking to him, what I didn't realize is Jericho wrote this with me, but for different reasons, very different reasons. And what I realized is, as I was writing Building a Better Anonymous, and we were very Socratic, and we started getting more nudging towards the end about how do you tap in all the great parts of what they're doing, but maybe reduce the risk to them and increase the benefit for their own causes. What I didn't realize is I was sort of writing my own motivation, that because he guided me here. He's essentially like, I'm like, wait a second, if they're powerful, so am I. So are we.
Yes. We talked about other nation states and bad actor groups using similar tactics. But what about us, is what you're saying?
I'm saying if these young, passionate activists can affect so much, maybe dangerously, what could someone do for good?
Yeah, what could older curmudgeon people do?
Or even young people.
Yeah. So
we left it alone. And as I was briefing people...
So you're forming the Avengers because you're a huge comic book fan, is what you're saying. Did you read the comics back in the day? Okay, so because there's different Marvel fans and nerds. I think it may very well be two groups, right?
I wasn't thinking about the Avengers at the time. I was thinking about the X-Men versus the Brotherhood.
Yeah, but there are people that read the comics. Yeah, there are people that watch the movies, and then there are the Star Wars fans and Star Trek fans.
Can't you be into all of them?
But you can be into all. I am into. I love all three of those universes. They're all awesome.
So
was that the cavalry basically?
Not yet. So that was in my head. And because that work, even though we were done, I started briefing more senior people. And eventually someone was at DEF CON, a Black Hat, and pulled me aside and said, "Would you please brief?" I had already briefed at Fort Meade on like a presentation on...
Because of your work on Anonymous.
About what I was concerned about. And I got invited back, and I said, I want to bring 5 hackers into Fort Meade. So we did a 2-day thing, brought 5 people in. Kaminsky was one of them. And we were supposed to answer challenge questions with General Alexander and 5 of his people.
Word is General Alexander will be here.
Oh yeah,
next month.
He's a polarizing figure in the hacker community.
Yeah, I agree.
So we went in. This is pre-Snowden. This would never have happened post-Snowden. Never. But we went in, and
wouldn't have happened because they wouldn't have trusted you.
The people I brought wouldn't have come, and the people.
Yeah. Okay.
They wouldn't have brought us in. But I'm going to try to tell I could get emotional here, but I'm going to try not to. So I was pretty much done. I figured if I can get the right message to the right people in power, they'll fix it. And I think
specifically about anonymous, similar kind of.
I was really worried about cyber caliphate. It wasn't called that yet, and we didn't know Trick was going to get killed yet.
Wait, who's Trick?
Oh, Junaid Hussain, the UK honor student who radicalized, joined ISIS, and got killed by a drone strike.
Oh, that was
Trick
him.
Was his handle.
Trick was his handle. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
I forgot. I'm bad with names. I listened to the story, so I knew who you were talking about. I just didn't remember his name.
So I don't think we knew about Trick yet.
Okay.
But I was very worried it was going to happen. Clearly for good reasons. So we're in there and we're answering these questions, and I'm going to try not to get triggered because we have a lot more to talk about. But we're in there. My mom had a stroke.
I remember
affected her speech.
I remember you saying your mom was sick.
And we figured she's just going to go to rehab, speech rehab. Brilliant lady, really wonderful lady. And while I'm in Fort Meade, you can't bring your cell phones in. So we're doing, it's like the most adrenaline I've ever had. I'm not just in a corridor of power, speaking truth to power, telling them things they don't know, helping them solve problems they haven't even identified yet, with incredibly powerful,
people
brilliant
like Dan
people like Kaminsky.
Yeah. You don't have to say that other people are.
I have before, but yeah. But these are people you would be happy to hear. And they were so complimentary. Like Gene Kim was one of them. He's not even necessarily a hacker, but I was trying to look at where's the future of IT going. So not just fighting the last war, but fighting the next war. And it was intoxicating because these hackers don't really talk to each other.
No.
And as they're hearing each other, we're coming up with things that you could never have done. In fact, we made a little fake poster where we put their faces on the Avengers for the first Avengers movie poster. And it was amazing. But then we go back to my car and I had 18 voicemails.
Oh,
and it was people
good news.
Saying, I didn't know what it was. So I just started listening to them.
Yeah.
In the order they came. They're like, I'm so sorry to hear about your mom. And I didn't tell the guys because we had another whole day of this to do. But essentially what they found out was glioblastoma, brain cancer. She's definitely going to die. It was going to be slow. It was going to be hard. But I'm like, just gutted. But I'm also like deeply concerned about national security, public safety, human life. So
your mom's illness, one of my new friends, his dad just passed away from that.
It's a death
sentence. Google it
Yeah.
just for context because it's not pretty.
It's not pretty. So trying not to dive down that path. I had to tough it out. We did all the whole second day. And at the end of it, we're like, okay, good. I've communicated this. I feel
like a weight has been lifted
unburdened
on that portion of your life.
And at the end of it, we do the readout because he wasn't there the whole time for all 2 days. We do the readout with him. He's like, I can't do this. I don't have the authorities do that. People will have to die first for this. There's no political will to do that. And
this is General Alexander.
Basically, almost everything on our list was a no. And for what the team knew, we were at the bar that night and almost no one spoke. We were just
drained,
exhausted, but also demoralized.
Defeated, yeah.
And I said half of the story in that moment. I said, guys, the cavalry isn't coming. No one's going to save us. But I didn't have the conclusion. Well, fast forward, and I need to fast forward. I'm going to cry. But so we are going to hospice my mom towards my sister's house nearer to where I live so the two of us could lean in. And she wanted to go to her church one last time, just say goodbye. And horrible timing. It was the Sandy Hook shooting. So the entire congregation was crying, was in shock. My two little girls are crying because they're scared to go to school. They're crying because their Mimi's dying. And I'm just looking at my mom, looking at my daughters, looking at my mom, looking at my daughters for like 2 hours straight. The preacher was pissing me off. And it's not even his fault, but he was pissing me off because he kept saying for 2 hours like an idiot, why is there evil in the world? Why is there evil in the world? And I just was mad. And I'm not an angry person, but I was mad.
I don't think I've ever really seen you mad, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm mad a lot the last 2 years. Mad a lot right now. But anyhow, months go by, we're hospicing her, we're watching her slowly die. And she's really brave in the way she's dying. And she's trying to be really cheerful. We do a living wake with all her brothers and sisters and parents. And eventually towards the end, it just started getting bad, worse and worse and worse. Right near your birthday, actually, was when she died. because I remember doing the show with you and Jean shortly after, like 2 days after she died. Yeah. But I had to give a funeral, eulogy at that same church.
And you gave your mom's eulogy.
Yeah, at the same church. And I got to the church and I forgot how angry I was, but I felt angry again. I'm like, you can't be angry at your mom's funeral. So I'm trying to keep it at a certain altitude here. Bear with me. So I sit in the car longer than I should have. And I'm listening to Tool. Mm-hmm. And there's a really sad song about his mom dying. And I'm just angry. I'm trying to metabolize my anger and turn it into something. But I'm like, I have to go in the church. And as I walk in the church, a light bulb goes off. And I wanted to be some positive message. So while I get up to speak, I'm the eldest of 4, all of her brothers and sisters. She was the eldest of 8.
Did you write down your speech?
No, I didn't know what I was going to say. I was all sorts of, I was a wreck. And I said, last time I was here, I was really angry. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I think I just figured out why. So somebody got really sick when I was in 7th grade. So for some fluke, my mom got to be my substitute science teacher for like most of the year. Mm-hmm. And she's a great teacher, phenomenal teacher. And I learned a lot of things from her, but one of the things I learned is that darkness isn't a thing. It's an absence of light. And cold isn't a thing. It's an absence of heat. So maybe it's not just the presence of evil, but the absence of good. And maybe if something's missing, we got to put it into the world.
And you came up with that on the fly?
Right on the fly. And then I said...
That's impressive, by the way.
What's the absence of Marie? I asked all of our family. Her name was Marie. And I didn't even have an answer to my own question. Mm-hmm. But I said, we don't get to find out because now it falls to us to do what she was doing. As soon as I said that, like
it clicked.
Everything clicked for me. And I remember how I felt was 2 things through the dying process was it crystallized what matters and what doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to mess around anymore. I just wanted to do things that mattered. And also maybe hyper conscious of time because an average lifespan is not a minimum lifespan. Mm-hmm. She was pretty young. So I didn't want to waste time. But when I said it falls to us, whether I realized it in the moment or not, I'm like, oh, if the cavalry isn't coming, it falls to us. And I knew that when I could pick myself up and get past the grieving process, which was significant grieving, if something's missing, I need to do it. Not just me, but we. And there's so much talent and passion. What if we could inspire the positive parts of anonymous and hacktivism, but towards making the world a safer place?
Yeah.
And I reached out to a few people. Percoco was one. He hasn't really stayed involved much, but he completely understood what I wanted to do. And I said, look, this is a hobby for a lot of us. It became a profession when we weren't looking, but it's also a higher calling. Like some of this stuff really matters. And it's obvious when I say it now, but I said, this is where bits and bytes meet flesh and blood. As we increasingly add software and connectivity to critical infrastructure, the country and society increasingly depend on this. They increasingly depend on us, and it can't be about our egos and just making money. Like there's a higher calling here. And I don't know when I decided this, but whether we're up for the job or not, what we do is relevant to the entire species. And if we can rise to meet that moment, we can make the world safer. And look, I'm not anti-tech, and I don't want to stifle innovation like all the people think. What I said is our promise and apparel to medicine. If we had better medicine innovation, maybe my mom would be alive. So I want that. And I don't want us to be reckless, right? There's a promise and apparel. Mm-hmm. So this idea of if it's dark, if it's cold, be light, be heat, be good. And we actually spread our ashes near a lighthouse in New Hampshire. So when I go to see my mom, I don't go to a graveyard. I go talk to a lighthouse. And there's lots of great stories there too. But that kind of made me, we didn't have a name yet for the cavalry. We had a talk. We submitted to DEF CON before I chickened out and said, the cavalry isn't coming. What's our responsibility?
Even before you chickened out?
I was afraid that as my healing, because I was, the bad part about being emotionally destroyed is I felt dysfunctional and broken.
It's hard to give a presentation after you lose a parent.
Well, it was a while in between, but
yeah.
But when I
was there, I completely empathize with you on that. And I lost my dad to a similar brain disease as your mom. Not quite the same. It was FTD, but similar path.
I know this is PG-13, so I can't say what I normally would say here, but F cancer.
Yeah.
Some of our friends have just been through this.
Yes.
So it was gutting, but here's what in the grieving process, I liken it to like a bomb goes off near you, or you get punched really hard in a fight. I was slowly coming back, my hearing, my sight.
Yes.
But what I didn't realize is I thought I was need to outgrow my brokenness, but the brokenness was not. It was empathy. And I was having authentic human connections, and I was speaking in a raw way and not being as worried about what people thought.
Yeah. I think that brokenness doesn't leave you. And I think that you've chosen to do something good with it. And I had similar revelations as well. Like, I need to stay positive because life is not forever.
But when I decided to try to do it, I wanted to commit myself to it in case I got worried or imposter syndrome. Because, we have a lot of gatekeepers and elder gods in the rockstar community that don't like what I've done. And I needed to make sure I saw it through. So we did. And
why would, now knowing even more of the backstory that I'm not sure everyone else necessarily knew before they started poo-pooing it. Some people poo-pooed the idea of the cavalry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Because they were just a different P in there. They were about more the prestige or the profit, more so than the protecting. I used to spend a lot of time, but yes, depends on who hated it.
Yeah. Part of it was people didn't think I was elite enough. They thought I was doing this to get famous because they want to get famous. So they're a prestige they projected that I was.
The technical wizardry doesn't need to accompany those that want to do good.
Yeah.
I think you can do good without the technical wizardry. And I think that's one of the reasons why I created this show, Josh, was to highlight that.
Good.
Not to say technical wizards can't be awesome.
We need them. Yeah.
Yes.
Let me take, all right. So one of our early successes in the cavalry, fast forward a lot. Look at the technical prowess of, say, Barnaby Jack or
another one.
I know he lost. We were trying to pull him in, and he died just before we launched the cavalry. We were talking, because of his medical device work. We knew we were going to do cars, medical. So
he's famous for the ATM,
but also the insulin pump.
Yeah,
like emptying an entire insulin pump. So Billy Rios was on our target list, Jay Radcliffe. We knew some patients that weren't really ready to go public yet, but they were medical device patients that had pacemakers. Now they've come out, like Marie Mo, we met later.
Yeah.
So what we realized is only someone like Billy can find the bedside infusion pump flaw where he can empty a 3-hour dose in 30 seconds and kill people. But they weren't as good at getting the FDA to listen, causing the results they wanted. So we had a lot of technical skills and we had a lot of passion. We were not accessible. And whether I realized it or not, the empathy that I didn't want to shed created the Avengers. So it wasn't just, Thor's strength or, Tony's strength or Black Widow. It was, can we be, in fact, the tagline of the cavalry became safer sooner together. I said, people are going to have to die first, but the idea is we might be safer sooner if we work together. And didn't know if it would work. 50 people signed up right away, eventually a couple hundred. And we thought it would just be hackers, but it eventually became govies and lawyers and policy people.
We need that,
nurses.
We need that diverse mix.
Yeah.
We do. We need to work as that diverse mix of personas and people from different backgrounds and different skill sets.
And on that episode you're talking about from your tweet, when we already told the story, so I won't rehash it, but the FDA was working with us, understanding the 5 Ps, having a better way to hear Billy. They did the first ever recall or safety communication just for cyber reasons, and nobody died. We figured they'd have to wait till people died. And we saw well earlier than we expected the power of empathy, good faith, complementary skills focused on making the world safer, not finding the bug, not even fixing that one bug, but that we wanted to fix the incentives for all medical device makers. And so we knew we were onto something. And the cavalry initially pissed some people off because they felt like someone else should be doing it, or they felt like it was moralizing, or some people thought their revenue and their profit and prestige were threatened because here I am giving away free advice on certain things that can and should be free. And if you want to pay for the advanced stuff, go pay for them. But they thought there's a finite amount of fame and Josh is stealing it. Or I was going to make millions of dollars off this and now Josh is giving it for free. And it triggered some severe hate. But also there's just a base level cynicism in a lot of these folks. And just our entire attitude and aesthetic was very different. But there's a great Everclear line. It says, we're possessed by a power bigger than the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I had enough conviction that this was important. In the middle somewhere, Trick got killed with the drone strike, and like my deepest fears were manifesting. And I knew that we were getting worse faster than we were getting better. And I just toughed it out. But it was really hard when you helped me a lot at Derby, because I was it was one of the low moments when some of our closer friends were really vicious.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I was really hitting
because I think I was just going off like stuff I had heard mostly second and third hand.
Yeah.
And then again, I was listening to you talk like,
well,
you're trying to do the right thing. What people hating on you, dude?
I don't think I've said this one out loud, but let's just do it. That trip, I think that was the year. I was giving a talk with Christian Nemeth and Jeff Tully, two physicians. They grew up as hackers going to DEF CON, Quaddy and Replicant. They're much younger than you and I. And they went to med school. And so Bo and I and those two founded this thing called Cyber Med Summit, where we did live ER hacking simulations to see if physicians could save the patient and save the life.
Yeah.
And this is first of a kind, groundbreaking work.
Yeah. This was before RSA had that. They had the hospital bed at RSA.
We did that too.
You did? Yeah. That was you. Okay.
But the very first one was at their alma mater in Arizona. And we wanted to do a DerbyCon talk to show some of the video and talk through what we did. Well, a couple people in a Facebook group that I'm not in because I hate Facebook decided that I was a plagiarist and that I was plagiarizing this and that I had plagiarized them. And they rallied to get my talk canceled. And Kennedy's like, show me the proof. Like, Josh is an honest guy. I know he did this work. Like, he was talking about it for years. I know the doctors he did it with. Like, shut up. But they just had a consensus that Josh is plagiarizing and he's a glory seeker. And like, so they tried really, really hard to pull the talk. No, they didn't pull the talk, but I saw you and I'm like, it's hard enough to like lean in to try to do something for everybody else and to learn how govies work and to learn, how you trigger an antibody response from the medical device makers. Like, this is hard enough work
without more challenges
like,
from our
friends,
own community.
Doing this. And it wasn't even honest. Like, nobody had proof because there wasn't any proof.
Yeah.
And then I started wondering how many conferences or talks did pull talks.
Yeah.
But, just another example where I don't know why, but I stopped letting it bug me and I just focused on the mission. And, we lost some relationships but other people came around too. People that used to hate that thing. They would apologize. They'd come in later and then they'd start contributing because they're like, I don't want my bug to sit on a shelf or get ignored. I want to get a recall too. So we're well over 1,000 people as of a couple of years ago. We stopped counting. But, we wrote policy briefings. I went into the Atlantic Council to help NATO allies understand cyber safety earlier than they would have. We, after the Mirai botnet, we wrote, some of our friends hate any public policy, but we wrote a framework that became an IoT bill. And while the IoT bill didn't pass, it got reintroduced in the next Congress and is now law of the land. I think we might be the first hackers that caused a law. And there's problems with the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act.
Is that what it was called when it went through a second time?
First time. I think it was slightly different in the second time.
Gotcha.
But
it included other stuff the second time around.
Yeah, it was about,
that's how it.
Yeah, it was about 4 years start to finish because it was the beginning. It was Mirai was just before the 2016 election, and the law was signed in. The bill was signed into law December 2020. So 4 years later. But we did things like SBOM, and some people hate SBOM. Like, hackers hate transparency.
This is when you were at the think tank.
No, it started at the think tank.
Okay.
Yeah. But, we leaned in and we earned the trust of US and international. And the idea wasn't like we want to work with government or have oppressive regulations. It's that they're going to do something. As soon as any technology that starts to have the ability to affect public safety,
they're going to do something with or without us.
With or without us.
Damn it, they might as well do it with us.
And as you know, I was one of the loudest vocal critics against PCI, checklists, compliance stuff. So what I didn't want is a PCI regime. So I'm like, can we focus them instead on capabilities and primitives? Like, are you patchable? Patchable.
Yeah. No, that's a thing. Yes.
Do you have a coordinated disclosure program to avail yourself of willing allies acting in good faith? Are you using hard-coded default passwords? Or, just simple things that we should probably try to discourage. And incentives, carrots and sticks, do that. So people hate me in part because they hate any government. They hate any regulation. And Bruce Schneier,
I was in that camp for a while.
I still sort of am, but it's not.
I think in talking with people, Josh, people like Cory Doctorow and many others that are way smarter than I am, it kind of brought me around to like, regulation's good. The people should be involved.
Yeah.
Right? Not just the legislators, but people who are experts and experienced in the field should be involved. And we can have good. I think the reason why legislation gets a bad name is because we have so much crappy legislation.
And we still do, because some of the bill we wrote got severely damaged and, and mutated. But
that happens.
You know, I don't usually quote Bruce Schneier, but he had a great line somewhere along the line. He's like, the choice isn't legislation or no legislation. The choice is literate legislation or illiterate legislation.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So some of those seeds we planted have borne fruit. Some of them are still in process. The SBOM, the software bill of materials stuff I've done for now 9 years.
Mm-hmm. Josh, you want to say one more thing about the pandemic?
Yeah. So when Krebs called to ask, you know, would you like to come into CISA for a year? It was an emergency hiring authority. But I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, 85% of hospitals don't have a single security person. What if I come in and there's nothing we can do for them? You know, they're, you know, like to quote Wendy Nathan, they're living below the security poverty line.
You'd literally be pissing in the wind.
Yeah. Like, am I going to go into a federal a philosopher hacker going into a federal bureaucracy with Fed pay, leaving behind, you know, and I just been through a blindside divorce not too long earlier. But like, I just felt the call because I knew that whether it was hospitals or not, you know, CISA's charged with defense of critical infrastructure. And if I believe in the cavalry mission is like bits and bytes meet flesh and blood, what if people start attacking critical infrastructure? And while we will talk about the CISA journey in a separate, you know, chunk, just think about when I talked about this and was mocked about this, and when the team bravely leaned into this in spite of the criticism, people were like, no one would ever hack these things. But if you look at the last 18 months, all right, just take this in. We've seen publicly successful cyber attacks on the water we drink, the food we put on our table, the oil and gas for our cars and our homes, the schools our kids go to, the timely availability of patient care with demonstrable loss of life, by the way. Municipalities are running our towns and cities. Federal governments are charged with state secrets and national security. Shit's on fire. So like if people in our hobby / profession ever doubted that society is increasingly depending on our skill set, we need them now more than ever. So while I went in to maybe help with hospitals, we ended up having to do quite a bit to protect the nation's critical infrastructure. And it is in bad shape. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And as we enter a conflict with Russia around Ukraine, you know, shit's gotten real.
These are scary times.
So when we talk about heroes on your new session here, I ask you, are we like the Avengers or like the boys? Are we going to put our egos and our selfish goals above and beyond the common good? Or are we going to step up because no one else is going to fix this for us? They can't do this alone. So, you know, whether you think it's misguided or you don't like the aesthetic, like what we do dramatically affects our friends, our family, and our access to lifeline critical infrastructure. And it's going to get pretty ugly. So while I don't want to end on a dark note, we've got to figure this out.
Yeah. And then at some point,
it's an executive order. Yeah.
You went to work for CISA.
Oh, so that part. This is my... When I say I'm an idiot altruist, I mean it. Right when the pandemic got declared.
Were you working for where were you working?
So the job I had just prior, this would easily be too long a story. Let me simplify the story. I was on your show here right before RSA.
Yes.
Then we went to RSA.
This is RSA 2020.
Yeah, the last one.
Yep.
And Krebs was in the cavalry ran most of the villages in the sandbox.
Okay.
And one of them was called the supply chain sandbox. We were doing SBOM stuff and software and hardware supply chain stuff. And Krebs was a partner, like CISA was a partner for that. And I didn't even really know him.
Because Krebs was already he started running CISA probably 2017, 2016, whenever it was created, right? He was the first appointee?
He was, yeah. His is, he got fired on Twitter just after the election.
Yep.
So he had about 2 years as the CISA director.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I didn't know him that well, but Bryson and Bo knew him pretty well.
Sure.
So I'm standing there with him, patient zero. Everyone's clearing out of RSA like in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
He's wearing his red pants from the famous red pants talk he did with Bryson. And I said, hey, I know we don't know each other that well, but I think you're going to see a lot of attacks on hospitals, ransomware. If your team wants a debrief, because I was on a congressional task force for 2 years for healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And we only put so much in the report, but I was really worried about ransomware. We just didn't want to advertise the weakness. So I said, if you want the director's cut for your team, let's do it. He's like, no one's going to attack hospitals. I'm like, dude, they're going to attack hospitals. People are going to pay because we have to pay. I hope you're right, but this is going to get ugly. So anyhow, a couple weeks go by, everyone's reeling, pandemic gets declared. And I said, hey, he calls me. And I said, hey, you ready for that briefing? He said, no. How'd you like to serve your country for a year? And I'm like, oh boy.
And that's where the story will pick up
on the next episode.
On the next episode.